Sewer Authority Midcoastside to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Director Slater Carter.
Present.
Director Roddick. Director Roddick.
Here.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Director Clark.
Here.
Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Chair Dye.
Here.
We have a four.
Moving on to public comment, oral communication. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? All right, I don't see any.
Hi.
Oh, Michelle.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that the couple of things. I was at the watching the legislative committee meeting for Half Bay, and there was a AB 339 that talked about communications. Everybody has to do Zoom, and then there's also a question about how much translation needs to be done, outreach. So I just thought, in case you hadn't seen it, I just thought I'd mention it. And no,
It's hard. You're not coming through very well, Michelle. So.
And then I was doing some BOD research at the OPL, and I happened to meet
Michelle, we're having a really hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Well, and you're showing as muted. So
I have my sound all the way up. Can you hear me?
Yes, but it's
All
very.
right, I'll just send an email. Sorry.
Sorted.
Yeah.
I did unmute myself, but apparently you still can't hear me.
Right. Well, we can hear you. It's just very distorted.
So I'm going to chat.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. We welcome your input, and we're sorry we can't really hear you. So we'll.
Now, would you like that added to the minutes for our next meeting, your chat? Would you like your chat added to the minutes for the next meeting? That was a yes. Okay.
Okay, very good.
Great. All right. Then anyone else who wishes to speak? Okay, then moving on to the consent agenda, approving minutes and disbursements. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent calendar? I don't see that. Can I have a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second? Is there any further discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Director Roddick.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Penrose.
Yes.
Chair Dye.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Moving on to regular business. Item A, receive and file SAM audited financial statements for fiscal year 2019 to 20. Kishan, do you want to speak to this?
Yes. So we have the audit for the year 2019, 2020 done. That's in your packet. But before I hand it over to John Cropper, I'd like to thank Cropper and his team, Mays and his team, and of course our finance officer, George Evans, for having completed 3 audits in one calendar year. That was amazing. And the entire team did an excellent job. So over to John, and John, go ahead, forum is yours.
Okay, well, Kishan, that kind of summarizes it all right there, doesn't it? Right, George and Peter? It's a pleasure to be back here on Zoom in a year that's been so troublesome for many. It kind of was a great year for Sam and the finance department, I gotta say. Do you see my screen? I've got a little short presentation. Okay, I'm seeing a nod.
Yeah, we can see.
So you know, we're here current with the financial statements. Going to talk tonight about the financial statements for June 30, 2020. Would have been a little earlier, but we get busy this time of year, so it's really a credit to all those working that we were able to persevere and get these to the board. The board has hired Cropper Accountancy and Mays. Mays has been a big help. I'm sure George would agree to get us to where we are today. The board hires us as an independent audit firm to express basically an opinion on page 1. And hopefully you have the financial statements. There's a couple letters that go along with it. But that first page, it basically says that you have an unmodified audit opinion. If it was modified, that would be a bad thing. It used to be called unqualified. Those are both good things. A couple of years ago, we had a modified opinion to a small degree. And so I think the board really got serious about what was going on with, the GL system and some of the other controls that were in place. And we've seen significant progress over the past couple of years. Page 42, it's not an opinion, but it does talk a little bit about internal control over compliance. It's a report there. We've got 2 communications. One, the SAS 114, I call it the 114 letter. It's the communications letter to those charged with the governance. So that's the board. And it's kind of a template-y kind of, I'm going to actually see if I can pull it up here. It's a template-y kind of, that's the first page, sorry. No, that's not the one. Would you know, I get the third one. Okay, so this is the letter that you should have received. It's very template-y, but you can see here where I have the bullet points in. Talks about the most sensitive estimates for the board. And the first one is basically that, with all the fixed assets that you have, we don't know exactly how long they're going to last. So that's an estimate. And there's a depreciation amount that goes along with that. We don't follow the IRS at all. We, could have engineers that say something will last 100 years or it might last 10 years or maybe even 2 years. So those are all estimates, but they're pretty good estimates until they're not good estimates, okay? Number 2 bullet point there and number 3 are kind of the same. We've had actuaries kind of take over at CalPERS and they tell you a lot about your pension and about the OPEB liabilities. And there's several pages in your notes that have to do with those. Some of the areas of this letter you can peruse down through, but in essence, this isn't where I want to focus tonight. I'd rather get back on here and talk to you a little bit about the management letter, open it up for questions, and talk a little bit about the financials. So we do have a management letter. It's going well. I'm sure that there'll be some questions. We only had really one material comment. So this is this letter dated April 1st, 2021. Somebody say something?
February 1st?
February 1st, the letter is just dated February 1st, 2021. That's when it was written. And we talk about the equity net position fund balance that we've talked about for a little bit every year. In the current year, you can see there management's response on material entry. I guess we had a capital project that was expensed and it was not capitalized, but we needed it to be in the prior year. And there's a couple other things that we say in this letter. We follow up on prior year findings. You can see here in 2019, we followed up and kind of said that this accounting personnel and journal entry thing, we think that thing has been resolved to our satisfaction as auditors. then we get to more significant deficiencies. We add a comment that we wanted to talk about the unrestricted net position a little bit there. And then the last thing was partially resolved by, I guess, the board this year established a trust. So that's a real quick overview, and we can go in more detail if the board would like to in a minute. But back, I'm able to maneuver here. So that's kind of the audit results. Gives you a very broad view of what we're talking about. Noteworthy items. So here's kind of where you could look on your financial statements on page 8. You know, the financial statements are made up of the opinion. There's the management discussion and analysis that management writes, then there's financial statements and the notes. So it's got 4 areas. 4 areas. How's that? And on page 8, you can see of the financial statements that the assets of the authority are 20 million, a little over 20 million, 20 million 6. The liabilities are 4 million 4. Take the assets minus liabilities, you get your net position. You know, that number is 16.7. Of course, the board knows that a lot of your assets are invested in capital assets and you can't spend them. So after you look at your net position a little bit more carefully, the key number for the board to kind of remember is that you have about 1.3 million in unrestricted net assets that is spendable. So after you get all your receipts in and all your disbursements paid, you'll be left with 1.3 million. And that is under a GAAP basis, and that is progress, okay? The auditor's happy with that, okay? And then the next bullet point, you can see that if you were going to go, and we can do this, go into page 9, you'd see the operating loss about midway through the page there is 1,224,000, and then after the non-operating revenues, it's that number 1.172. So it's a negative number, but I'm sure somebody would point out, you need to look to the depreciation number, which is obviously a non-cash number that could be offset against that. And then further down on the page, you'll see that there's capital contributions of $2.4 million. And so you are actually adding to the bottom line, which is why we find ourselves with a net position that's making the auditor a little happy, okay? All right, so with that, I'm gonna try and get my page to go. There we go. Just like I was saying, I think I've mentioned most of these numbers there. It's just summarized, nice and neat. We can come back to this. I hate to have those deferred outflows and deferred inflows on there, but that's part of one of the new GASBs, not so new now, but it had to do with pensions. So outflows are kind of like assets and deferred inflows are kind of like liabilities, but there's some timing things going on there. And then this is with this statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. This is kind of a summary of what I was also talking about in terms of the ins and the outs and your operating loss. You can see the operating loss there. It's better than last year. And you can see your capital contributions about halfway down are increased, as well as quite a remarkable change in your net position, 1.3 million, which is adding to your beginning net position. And you can see the 16.7 on the bottom of the slide here, compared to last year, 15.5. So, you know, this is more or less what I wanted to cover. And I'm prepared to go to the financial statements, any page that you guys would like me to. I'm scanning now to the balance sheet because I think we'll probably end up in the balance sheet income statement area. Of course, I'm not calling them by the proper name. The balance sheet is what we call the statement of net position for the authority. And the income statement is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. But for simplicity, I'll just call it balance sheet and income statement. Okay. So I've gone over the overview. What kind of questions do you have for your auditor?
Okay, is there anyone from the board who has a question? Do we have I think we have a member of public, Greg Dieguez. Did you have questions?
I have two, if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
So my background is financial services kind of stuff. And when we did mergers and acquisitions, we used to sample a lot of detail about a firm we were going to acquire. For instance, we'd sample the receivables, look at the payables, the contracts, and so forth. Can you describe what kind of actual, and I'll call it auditing, sampling you did and of what accounts underneath the presentation of the financial statements?
So let me give you a quick overview and you can tell me if we've, you know, the difference between a review and an audit is we go into a lot of detail so far as understanding what the internal controls of the authority are. So we can rely, if we do enough testing, on the categorizations that are happening with the general ledger. We look at segregation of duties and we see who's inputting it into the GL, who could override that from a defalcation standpoint. We look at the reconciliations. We look at journal entries. We test journal entries. We look at the authorization of checks going out. And all of that is, you know, testing that may or may not help us with our opinion. As far as the opinion, we do start with the trial balance. And so, Greg, we'll start with cash. We'll confirm cash. We'll kind of go down through it. We don't know how much cash could or would have violated some of the segregation of duties issues that we talked about. But sure enough, there it is. It's at that bank. It's at LAIF. It's at Camp. And then we go down and we look at accounts payable or accounts receivable. And we look at accounts receivable. The district or the authority says, look, we got X amount of money in receivables. And we'll go, oh, yeah? Well, let's look subsequent to year end. In other words, we're auditing through June 30, 2020. So we'll look subsequent to June 30. We'll look in July, August, September, you know, and we'll say, did these receivables come in? Can we really prove that they were receivables at June 30? Or are there other amounts that should be there? And can we confirm those amounts? Sometimes we will go quite heavily into the debt and confirm the debt. We do the same thing with accounts payable. We'll see what's been paid subsequent to year end. And we'll look and test materially and see, oh, were some of those items that we tested in the right year? So we'll look at a large item that's been paid and say, was that, we pull the invoice, we go, was that truly before June 30 that it was actually due, or should it belong in the next fiscal year? So we'll go through and we'll hit every single balance sheet item, confirm the debt, then we get to the P&L, you know, we can confirm, and we do confirm with the actual districts that are the customers of the authority, right? So you've got three, the board here is represented by basically 3 sanitary districts. And so we'll actually confirm revenues with them. And so it goes along those lines. But if this was a different kind of entity, we might be conferring with the state and the county. Okay, that's a lot of audit speak. Greg, what did I miss? What did I hit?
Well, I'm going to ask a related follow-up before I get to my second question. So, just as background, this agency has been plagued over the years by, I'll call it mistrust in some parts, by the quality of its financial statements. And so it's good to see this apparent progress. Do you make available?
Let me stop you there, Greg. Let me just stop you there. We were the auditors a couple years ago and reported to this board, and we actually did not issue an unqualified opinion.
Right.
Yeah. So you're aware of that.
My related question is.
I just like to jump in here and say, express my appreciation to George and to Peter and Jesse at Maze for working so hard to straighten everything up. So I just wanted to get that out there.
So my related question is, with respect to the testing that you did do you make available any worksheets or letters, for instance, that you sent to the banks and the various agencies regarding the balances, the number of journal items you tested, number of receivables?
No, they're proprietary.
So there's no way of assessing. Okay, there's no way of assessing the degree of that audit. Okay.
No, you don't know. No, that's not common practice, Greg.
Okay.
We are audited. If you're concerned about the auditor, we are peer reviewed, and actually our firm is a PCAOB inspected firm. In other words, we actually have many audits that we report to FINRA and the SEC on, which is the industry you're referring to. And if you are in that industry, you know how hard it is. You get inspected all the time. So yeah, our firm is a PCAOB firm. In addition to following the standards, we have passes on our peer reviews all the time. The district has had some difficulty, or the authority, in the past. I think that's what you were referring to. I don't think you were questioning the diligence of the audit. So,
well, no, I'm looking for comfort. You know, that's what I'm hoping the auditor provides. Okay.
And the comfort. Okay.
My second question, you hinted at it when you talked about the net position and, you know, omitting the $1 million in depreciation. I'm concerned about the capital adequacy, to use a banking term, of the agency. And so I'm wondering to what you can point us that we could use as a methodology for evaluating the capital adequacy of the agency. You know, certainly depreciation is kind of funny with a sewer agency, because you're using yesterday's dollars to write off assets that are now worth a lot more than that. So it's kind of a meaningless number.
You know, what you're bringing up is a very good point.
Tell me something. Yeah.
What I hear you saying is, with that estimate of depreciation, hey, are you funding this enough so that when we have repair and maintenance down the road, is that going to cover it? And is that what you're saying with the, yeah, okay. And I agree with you. And I think that one of the next GASBs that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board will probably come out with, after they've just recently done one on pensions, is making sure that the adequacy of the infrastructure is there. That is something an auditor is not able to do. It's something an engineer is able to do. I mean, we audit some cities, you know, you drive around a city and you look at the roads and you know that they're bad or not, and people do rate those roads. The auditor doesn't, you know, but let's just say the city of Orinda a couple of years ago, they keep throwing a bond out there and the people keep saying, you know, I don't think so. We don't want more taxes, but their roads are kind of terrible, but their finances are pretty good. And they don't have a lot of debt. I'm just speaking from knowledge here. So in terms of the infrastructure, I think that you had some problems with the infrastructure with a major pipeline a couple years ago. You know, some of it is luck of the draw. Others, you know, are able to go in and just, you know, spend time with their engineers and look at some of the infrastructure and know proactively what they need to be doing. That was not included in this audit. So if I was a bond guy and I wanted to know how well the bond people would assess you for putting a bond out there, if you have to borrow to replace something, because if you don't have the money and the other districts that are the customers don't have the money, which is part of the comment that we had a couple of years ago, by the way, Greg, you look at the operating expenses, and I see the operating expenses on page 9 are some $7.3 million. $7.3 million. Well, if I was a bond guy and I thought, I've heard, and I don't know because I'm not a bond guy, I'm an auditor, that about a third of that you would want to have tucked away maybe in your net assets. And tonight I talked about a number of about 1.3 million. I would love to see it about double that. But we're headed in the right direction, and that's my story, and that's why I'm smiling tonight. 2 years ago, the board knows this because I know some of the board members that are still on from 2 years ago. I didn't have a smile on my face. I was actually looking at this as a troubled agency, and I don't consider it that anymore.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your answers to Greg. I think we need to move on. We really appreciate the fact that you have found that things have improved considerably. I also think, again, I just want to express our appreciation because Kishan brought on a new team, which is George Evans, who is the in-house financial person, and May's accounting with Peter and Jesse. And I'm afraid at this moment I don't have your last names, but you know who you are, who've all done a really good job of working with Cropper on this. And we appreciate their work very much, and we're pleased that this is a much, much better audit than we've had in the past. So
Barbara, can I also interject, not to interrupt you, but my thanks to George and to Jesse and to Peter. It really has been a team effort, and you couldn't have done what you did in the last year without each member of that team. And the continuity is a very, very important part of an audit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, does anyone else have further questions? Then thank you very much. Can we have a motion?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not, because you're over on the side and I'm not seeing everybody. Go ahead.
Let me do this. Let me get out. And so now
I can see everyone.
Blocking.
Okay, sorry.
That was
Director
my
Ruddick.
bad.
Director Ruddick.
Yeah, so what can we infer from the depreciation numbers? I saw one, 15 million remaining, it looked like net depreciation or the remaining depreciation. What does that tell us about, the status of our plant, of our infrastructure?
It doesn't really tell you a whole lot. What happens is every asset that you have when you purchase it and it is capitalized, when I say capitalized, you put it on your balance sheet as an asset. Somebody in management comes up with how long they think that asset is going to last. And that let's just use $1 million, and let's use the plant, okay, or infrastructure in the ground. You say that infrastructure in the ground, I think, is going to last 40 years. So you take that $1 million, divide it by 40 years, and every year we take 1/40th off of the books. So you hope that every year, and I think this goes to Greg's question, you kind of want to fund at least the depreciation amount. There's inflation that goes along, but you want to fund at least whatever depreciation amount that you have, because when that asset is gone, you're going to need to probably buy another one unless you've not correctly figured out what the capital asset timeline is worth. I don't know if that kind of explains how the depreciation works, but essentially, you could fully depreciate an asset and still have it there in the ground, right?
Is our funding keeping up with depreciation as you just described the ideal situation?
Yeah, so on your page 9 under operating expenses, there's a depreciation number of almost $1 million there. And that represents, in my example, 1/40th of that asset and a bunch of other assets. So it's, you know, it starts as that $1 million capitalized asset at the plant, which is a big number. And then you divide it by however many straight line years you think it's going to last, because we're not doing any IRS fancy accelerated depreciation or anything like that. You're just straight lining it. So you, at 40 years time, that asset is entirely gone or in need of replacement. And you can get more detail in the financial statements, but it doesn't give you the kind of detail I think you're after as to, are our assets old and are they in need of repair? That is not an assessment that is done by the audit. And that would be something that George would have, Jesse and George would probably have more detail on. I'm kind of looking for the capital assets. I think it's note 3 or 4.
Do we need to, Director Reddick, did that answer your question, or are you?
I asked also, are we funding commensurate with depreciation? He said you should be funding, you know, the amount, the annual straight line amount to compensate for the depreciation of the value of the asset. Are we funding at a rate that's commensurate, or are we not? Are there additional?
This year you did. And if you look at your page 9, how you know is you see the depreciation number, and then you see the change in.
Can you share your screen and show us that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Let me do that. Okay. I'm putting it on here. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. I need to get to page 9. Okay. So if you can see the operating expenses, I'm pointing here to this $999,373 depreciation expense.
Mm-hmm.
And if you follow me down a little lower, you'll see the change in net position. That's like your net income number, okay, on a GASB basis of $1,312,000. That number is bigger than your depreciation number. So this year you're adding about, you could say on a book basis, about $313,000 above and beyond your depreciation. So that's a healthy guideline. It's just a guideline. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can see each other. Okay.
So, but in the past, we haven't been doing that. So this is the first year.
Well, that's right. In fact, let's see if I were to go to. Okay, I'm gonna share another screen. Or am I? Yes, I can do that. Okay. I'm a little slower than I want to be here. Here we go. Sharing now. Okay, so if you look at this screen, you can, if you can see the number last year was $364,000. This year it's 1.3 was your net change. So this year you're above the 999,000. If last year's depreciation were similar, which it probably was, you didn't probably cover you didn't cover it. I'm looking in your MD&A. Actually, last year it was your depreciation was 1.2. So if you added the 2 years up, you're kind of close. But anyhow, that's That's a great question for you guys to be asking of your auditor. That's a great question. Part of the reason why we need to always be adding until we have a healthy net position.
Great, thank you. Director Slater Carter had a question, and then, or did, was yours
I had another question, follow-up question.
follow up? Okay, and then Director Slater Carter.
So on in your current screen, 05-2019, I just want to point out that the response that we're not funding OPEB because of the city's lawsuit is BS. There's absolutely no connection between the lawsuit and failure to fund OPEB. People are not funding OPEB because of the cost of OPEB. It has nothing to do with the lawsuit. And I don't want to see that remark again, and preferably have it stricken from the record.
Are you speaking to me?
I'm talking about management's response, and I'm directing this to management.
Oh, okay.
Item blaming the city's lawsuit for not funding, other employment benefits is crazy. It has nothing to do with it. It's a totally political remark that should not be in this document. That's all I have to say.
All right, Director Slater Carter.
Yes. One point is this plant is already 40 years old. Are you saying we should have reserves that are somewhat equal to the cost of replacing all of the worn out parts of the plant? And at this point, we've got about $1 million in reserves, and we should have $40 million.
I'm not saying that.
We have $2 million.
I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to point out is a correlation, a yearly correlation of at least trying as a board to fund the depreciation that is being expensed on a non-cash basis, so that it adds into your a kind of a rainy day fund, so that when you do have problems at the plant, you don't have to go out for a bond. I mean, maybe that's how the board would choose to do it. But you have two choices. Either you save the money, which would affect each one of your districts, because you'd have to have more money coming in, a little bit more money every year, adding to the bottom line, because Sam is the one that has the permit. Or conversely, or alternatively, if you don't have the money, then you'd probably have to go out for debt.
Right.
So, somebody is going to be part of exempting your bond, is going to look at it, how marketable that bond is, and it'll probably depend on how solid the authority is. It'll affect the rate that you get, right? So it's a little that question is a finance question, not so much of an accounting question, but it's a good question.
Because it has been a concern of Montera for a long time that we weren't adequately funding the replacement costs, and that that the budget then had a problem when we did have a major break.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. Is that what we're talking about? And
that's one of many.
And there was a pretty substantial fine. If I'm, we had issued our audit report like 3 months before that happened, and not that we were soothsayers or anything, but that was kind of addressed in our management letter back then. But I think the board is getting it. I mean, maybe I am not in on all the board meetings, but I do get the feeling that there's been a remarkable change in attitude with the board, and understanding that this entity, not each individual district that you truly represent, needs to be solid. And it's because you hold the permit here, and you need to work together, obviously, and that's tough on a JPA sometimes.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And as far as the management letter, I think it stands as fact. And the opinion of others is merely their opinion. And I don't want to see any changes in the management response to what is going on. Some of the things that may or may not show up in the audit is the number of budgets that Half Moon Bay has approved under protest, which may have a major hit on this organization at the end of this lawsuit, depending on the judge's decision. So I do think it's important that all the facts be included, not just those that satisfy some.
So the auditor
I
is.
entirely disagree with you. No connection. No.
We are welcome to disagree with each other. That's the whole point.
And we might be entering more into the political area than maybe the audit area. I am just looking at the numbers and kind of telling you what my feelings are based on the numbers. And this is historical information almost at this point.
Well, as treasurer this year, I look forward to working with you on the next audit because I think you have some very good comments. And I'd really appreciate your insight on what else we can do to improve our financial system so that we never run into this kind of problem again as we have in the last 5 years.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Matthew, the director.
I have some questions, not so much for proper accountancy, but for SAM management. But they come out of this letter that's dated February 1st, which I think is very valuable. The Cropper has identified deficiencies in internal control as material weaknesses. And the first two, management's responses are essentially, yeah, we did that, and gives reasons and the good things that came out of doing things that the Cropper says do not do, like adjusting journals being booked directly to net position is no, and Sam did that, and it had a what they described as beneficial effect. But what it doesn't say is that there has been an internal control established that doesn't happen again. And the second one, the answer, I think the way I read this is, this one may indicate that this is on administrative issues, accounting, personnel, and journal entries. The answer given by management may indicate that there has been a change that will alleviate this problem from now on, but it doesn't quite say that. And so I would like to know, I know there have been a lot of changes in accounting, financing, and we've had numerous firms come in and look at the situation, but I would be a lot more comfortable if it said straight out, well, we've set up new controls so these things don't happen again.
Can I add on that one, Director Clark?
Sure.
We on that one is 2019-01, I think that you're talking about. And our first thing under status, we actually updated, this is an old comment, and put resolved on that one. The first word is resolved, italics, and we kind of felt like we had more comfort with the controls around segregation of duties having to do with reconciliations, the general ledger, authorizations, those three areas that are so important, that you separate as much as possible. And if you can't, you mitigate it with somebody coming in and approving it on top, okay? For example, it might be George that's reconciling the bank accounts. Well, George isn't gonna be able to, he needs to have somebody approve and initial and go through that reconciliation. and have it part of the systemization. Same deal with the general ledger. If everybody can enter into the general ledger, it could present a problem, especially for somebody who is in charge of accounts receivable and accounts payable, because they can make journal entries around that area. So those also need to be resolved and mitigated. And I think probably Peter and George would do a better job, but explaining this, what's changed. But those are areas we were concerned about a couple of years ago, but we've gotten more comfortable.
Thank you. I'm glad, in fact, happy to hear that. But now I don't understand why we were furnished a document that does not have those two resolved notes on these important issues. So that's, I'd like to see
it says resolved, and probably the management response probably should say, as the auditor said, this is resolved, blah, 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 blah. But, you know.
But it doesn't.
Yeah, it's all right.
The third one, which is in italics at the status, is partially resolved. This is on the unrestricted net position at the management's response to this. At the bottom, Sam's management believes sufficient unrestricted liquid assets exist to cover 2 months of operational expenses, as is our current policy. Believes, I think, is a interesting word to use there. I would rather see it say, we know we have money for this, rather than we believe.
And Director Clark, where are you reading from? Are you on 2009-05?
I'm on the bottom of your page 3 of 4, page 75 in our agenda packet.
3 of 4, okay.
2020-02.
Okay, 02.
And that's not a question so much as a comment. That, like I say, I believe it's one thing, but knowing or at least asserting is different. And my question about that is, do these unrestricted liquid assets that are referred to, we're going reimbursement of to the member agencies is going to come up later, and I'm wondering whether those numbers of unrestricted liquid assets include the amount, which is over $1 million. I think it's $1.6 million that is going to be subject to reimbursement to the member agencies.
And by the way, I am very opposed to reimbursement because if you're taking the 1.3 that's been reserved, or effectively
More
put in
like
your
2 million that's been reserved.
Okay, well, on these financial statements, I think we're talking about $1.3 million, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's gone up, but if you take that money and you give it back to the districts, you won't be funding your depreciation anymore. And so I'm all for maybe the next year in the budget cycle of those contributing member districts, you might contribute less, but it's a lot of work for the district to allocate monies back, or the authority to allocate monies back. That money will get spent. I just don't think that's something that you should be doing.
And we're not going to take that up tonight. Tonight it's being introduced. We are going to take time to look at that.
I'm just giving you an opinion, yeah.
Just so you know, it's not we're not voting on it tonight.
Right, but unfortunately, we have to abide by what the JPA says. And the
JPA, meaning you folks, yeah.
The Joint Powers Agreement, the 40-year-old document, and it says it needs to be returned.
I'm sorry, Director Reddick, we aren't hearing what you're saying. You were commenting? Director Reddick, did you want to comment?
No.
Okay, sorry. Director Carter, did you finish what you were saying?
I said that the JPA, on the paragraph I read, said if a project is finished, the money left over needs to be returned to the agencies. So perhaps we have some work to do on clarification of the JPA.
So if I can add to that, a couple of years ago, we recommended that that very, very old document be updated.
You're not the only one. Anyway, we're not going to just, I mean, we talked about.
I'm just trying to talk. I apologize for how frank I am on some of this stuff. I just have kind of lived this with the board, and we almost resigned as auditors a couple of years ago. You know, we really have kind of tried to stick with you in a public service kind of way. And I'm trying to be very frank, and I'm trying to be very open that, you know, what you're doing this year was excellent. Keep it up, but you can't stop doing it.
Mr. Cropper, I would say that that the need for the JPA to be revised is something in which we probably have amazing unanimity.
Okay.
At least an opinion, but so far not an action. So, yeah, I'd like to
Again,
go forward.
reimbursing the districts is it's an idea that's being introduced tonight, but I said we can't decide it tonight, and we're going to postpone it for a later meeting with all of the implications and the.
You ought to get your auditor off here. He's been talking too much.
We have other items of business on the agenda.
Well, the fourth item on the same letter is on the last page under other post-employment benefits, the OPEB.
Yeah.
Mr. Cropper said earlier that this the trust that was recommended to be established has been done. This document says it has not been done.
No, I think it said partially resolved because it had been done. Am I wrong?
It says at the bottom of the management response is staff has been unable to initiate a contract to establish a trust. That sounds like it's not done.
Kishan, can you speak to that? Kishan, can you speak to that?
Trying to find the page, what we're talking
It's
about.
the last page, last line.
It's page 70.
So the finance team that want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the trust has been established.
Okay.
It's only the funds that have not been established as to how much to be moved. Am I right, Peter?
It's been established. It has not been funded.
Correct.
And there's talk about perhaps beginning funding it in this year's budget. But again, this is an item that we will be discussing in great detail as we go forward, because I know it's really complicated.
Well, I don't know why this doesn't say this fund has been established but not funded, rather than straight out. It's unable to initiate a contract means it hasn't been done. So
Good point, Matthew.
I'm done on that part.
I move that we
Thank you.
accept the audit.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Director Ruddock had her hand up first, unless you really want to go. Director
Nope.
Ruddock. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, could we have a roll call, please?
Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Ruddock,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Chair Dye.
Aye.
Motion passed.
I want to thank John Cropper for his work on all this. And again, I know I've said it like twice, but it can't be said too much because our financial team has really labored long and hard to turn things around. And I think we should all be really proud of what they've accomplished, what Sam has accomplished. And I think we're looking forward financially, in terms of accountability and so forth, to a good year ahead.
I think so too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm signing off if there's nothing further.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you so
John.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, moving on. Review and discuss the financial report for fiscal year 2019-20, budget versus actual from the audited financial statement. Do we need to have further discussion?
Yep, this is the budget versus actual report prepared by Mays Associates.
Okay.
There is also mentioned in the staff report about dispersing of the funds, but at the same time, staff has also recommended that we bring it to the finance committee and thereafter bring the decision of the finance committee to the board. So we could discuss it at a later stage, or we could discuss it now from other board members.
I think we should wait till we have a proper presentation on the pros and cons of doing that and the implications for the JPA. And
Agree.
I don't think this is not something that financially is an imminent need for a decision. So let's take our time and do it more thoughtfully.
Who's going to do that presentation?
Tonight, we're going to have a presentation though on the financial report. Yes or no?
No, just questions.
Reimbursement issue.
No, the reimbursement issue will be discussed at the finance committee meeting and thereafter brought to the board meeting later on, with the decisions of the committee. That's what's mentioned in the staff report too, upon the staff recommendation.
We have it on the agenda tonight, do we not?
No, we do not have it on the agenda tonight. Tonight it's review and discuss the financial report.
I want us to discuss the issue of reimbursement as soon as possible.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be tonight, right? I would like to see a proper staff report, and
I'm not going to wait until after we adopt the budget to discuss it.
no, I agree with that 100%.
Right.
So it needs to be urgent and it needs to be in advance of the budget.
Yeah, I would suggest we have it in the finance committee meeting, which is the regular finance committee meeting scheduled to be held next Thursday.
Okay. And you'll give us information on that and background. Okay.
That next Thursday is in 2 days.
No, next week, sorry.
Next
Not
week.
this Thursday, next week.
Okay.
I would like us to start that meeting at 10:30 as I have another meeting right at noon. And this is a serious item. So if we could start earlier, that'd be great.
Perfect. And if the other directors would like to have it earlier, I can always, on a different day, I can send out a doodle poll and we can find out availability of others.
A different day would be preferred, actually.
Perfect. I'll send out a doodle poll, Director Radak, and then we'll take it from there, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I can do it, but all right. Anything further on item B? There's no action required, so I think we're good. C, approve first addendum to employment agreement with general manager. And now is that you, Jeremy, who's going to introduce that, or? You're muted.
Jeremy,
Yep.
you're muted.
Yep, no, I'm good. Just looking for the button. Okay, so in the at the prior board meeting, the board provided direction during closed session for adjustments to general manager compensation, as well as the term of the agreement. And so special counsel and I, with the input from general manager, provided an addendum to the existing general manager contract that would extend the general manager's agreement per the board's direction and also provide a 3% cost of living increase. So that's what the board is being asked to approve this evening.
Any questions?
So moved.
Okay, is there a
Second.
second? Is there any discussion on that motion? All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Radak. Director Radak, you're muted. Director Radak.
Do a thumbs up.
Okay, got it. Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Chair Dye,
Yes.
motion passed.
General Manager Prathvadi, we appreciate your work and we're looking forward to a good year ahead. So,
Thank you.
very much. Item D, determination not to proceed with Amoresco scope of work and authorize general manager to pay Amoresco the project development fee of $60,000. We have a staff report.
This is in continuation with what we had discussed with the board in our January meeting. And at that point of time, a representative from Amoresco had suggested that we defer to the decision to a later date because Amoresco wanted to consider the project of refurbishing or providing new aeration basins. So apparently Ameresco did look into it and went into it in detail, and they came back saying that they would not be able to comply with the government code 4217, and therefore they would like to go back by what the board had decided earlier of not to proceed with the Ameresco scope of work and authorizing payment of the project development fee of $60,000. So any questions? Staff is here to answer them.
Any questions? Can I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the determination not to proceed with the Ameresco scope of work and that we pay the $60,000 that's we've agreed we owe them.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? I guess I have one comment, which I would like to make it clear that we do feel, Kishan, you do feel that the work that they did provided us with value, $60,000 worth of value. And that's one reason, in addition to being contractually required probably to do it, rather than fight it, there was value in the work that they did. You agree?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Can we have a roll call, please?
Director Slater-Carter,
Aye.
Director Radek,
Thumbs up.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Chair Dye.
All right.
Motion passed.
All right. E, authorize general manager to provide a letter indicating support for certain activities / projects that Senate Bill 45 would fund, and authorize general manager and general counsel to seek amendments as appropriate to support inclusion of SAM projects and priorities in SB 45 and AB 1500.
So in the last board meeting, the board approved a resolution to join the Water Bond Coalition, and that got passed. So Sam has participated and become a partner in the Water Bond Coalition. As a subsequent to that, Water Bond Coalition actually approached Sam to provide a letter of support for the Senate Bill 45. And just to give you an idea, Senate Bill 45, SB 45, has got about $5.51 billion. And the AB 1500, which is the Assembly Bill 1500, is about 6.7 billion. And that covers various areas of water, wildfire, parks, coastal resilience, sea level rise, and stuff like that. So primarily, we brought this to the board to authorize the general manager to provide a letter of support for certain activities that Senate Bill 45 would fund, and also authorize general manager and general counsel to seek amendments as appropriate to support inclusion of any SAM projects and priorities in both SB 45 as well as AB 1500. Now, if I may ask general counsel to add any more items or any more discussion on this, please go ahead.
Just very briefly, there was just in going through SB 45, there was like the definition for wastewater agencies that were eligible. The definition probably needs to be adjusted. I think there's going to be things like that, and so the reason to have both the general manager and I, the ability to engage to if there's opportunities for funding to recommend changes. We're not proposing to retain a lobbyist or anything like that right now, but just the ability to engage on a surgical basis to increase the likelihood that we can get funding for SAM projects.
And I would recommend, since, during the conference call today, the Water Bond Coalition conference call, it was mentioned that Assembly Member Mullen is basically driving, the allocations in AB 1500. So, you might even have a specific letter to Assembly Speaker Pro Tem Mullen, or even, meet with his staff over there in I forget where the office is, but
South City.
Lobby our guy,
Yeah. I was going to suggest the same thing. And I think it would be helpful to have a better sense of what projects might be possible to include in these. But I was thinking that it might be good for us to have a group of us go up there and meet with the staff. Sometimes the assemblyman will stick his head in, but I think we should really work on this. I thought it was a really interesting meeting. I took some detailed notes, which I will share with everyone. But we might as well position ourselves to be in the best position as possible. And what's interesting to me from the call today is how quickly they're pushing these. Like they are trying to get them on the June ballot right now. And I think they're really seriously working hard toward that goal so that particularly for the fire prevention money, that they can get that money out before the next fire season. And these bonds are a package with water and fire.
It actually would be the June 2022 ballot.
22, yeah.
Yeah, June 12th, yeah, but better to get it sooner rather than later. And
Well, they're accepting amendments now. And so, there are deadlines for first policy committee hearings and deadlines to get to fiscal committees. So I think we need to act in a timely way to identify amendments we would like or projects we'd like to fund, and then get a letter out and get to our legislators.
yeah,
There's one area of potential opportunity, and that I've seen, and there's probably others, but I forget if it's 1,500, if it's 45. There's a desire to try to help wastewater treatment plants that are likely to be affected by climate change, right? Rising sea level. So that's us to a T. And so we just need to be able to make sure that the eligibility criteria matches up with SAM. So that's one area, but there may be others. And so to the extent that you're aware of other areas where we may need to make changes to increase our likelihood of eligibility, let me know that.
Director Penrose.
Yeah, one of the things that came up for me during the meeting was that San Mateo County has a hazard mitigation plan that includes 22 cities and 15 other organizations, does not include us, does not include Coastside Water, and that we should be applying to be part of that plan. I don't know how we go about doing that, but we should be included in a hazard mitigation plan.
I'm wondering if it might be a good idea to have a small subset of the board sort of put together, work as to be looking at this and trying to help shape the direction that we go. I mean, are there those who would be interested in working on a little task force like that?
I'd be interested.
I'm happy to lend, what expertise I have in approaches, but probably I don't want to be in a position where I'm actually lobbying because I'm mixing hats kind of a thing.
Right. But we might,
Excellent.
yeah. Well, let's see what we can do with that. Let's think about trying to move that forward. Is there any further discussion on this item? Do we have a motion to authorize the letter and to authorize offering amendments to the legislation as appropriate?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Oh, I'm sorry, roll call, sorry, I'm back in the old days.
Director Slater Carter,
I support it.
Director Radek,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Chair Dye.
Aye. All right, so moving on, general manager's report.
Yeah, you'll be seeing the detailed report at the second meeting of the month. But I'd like to brief you all about the wet weather storage expansion project. And I know a lot of you may not have had time to really go past the project, but I'd like to show some pictures and make you feel that you're already there and walk past the project. So may I share my screen and show some pictures? Okay, so this was the start of the project. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So this was the start of the project where we had to install the construction fence, the privacy screen, and then take care of best management practices, which is BMPs. See, we had the straw wattles for the installation of BMPs. Then we started doing the installation of the construction entrance. This is the picture of the construction entrance. Yet another picture. And this is actually the entrance to the project site. And you would see that rock has been used there basically to minimize track out. Then we had the surveyor who came in to do all the surveying and staking. Then started the removal of topsoil. These are all pictures where the topsoil has been removed. Then we started excavation for the, basically for the storage chamber F, which is called as F. And you see on the left, this is basically the well, a dewatering well. And you see the red one on the top right-hand corner, and that is basically a dewatering tank in the background. There's a lot of groundwater is coming out, and that had to be sent out to the dewatering tank. So excavation had started, and then preparation, basically the subgrade prep and layout for the storage chamber F. This is what's going on. And there comes the first concrete block, which is the chamber F, one of the chambers of one of the chambers of this row. Primarily, there are 5 rows, and there are about 10 boxes in each row. This is one of those boxes. So when I talk of chamber F, that means it's one of the rows. So the wet weather storage expansion, which was completed in 2013, was labeled as 5 rows A, B, C, D, E. And now we start with F, G, H, I, J. So we started off with F, row F, and this is one of the chambers. Just to give you an idea, each of these chambers are basically 6 feet tall, 10 feet inside. And the complete row amounts to about 94 feet in length. And each of these chambers weigh about 37,000 pounds approximately. So these are the number of chambers which are kept one beside the other. And you see this portion there. What is facing you is actually a groove there, wherein a gasket sits, so that seals between 2 boxes. You see the groove there, and probably you'll have a better picture which shows the gasket. I'll show that to you then. And this is just measuring the, checking it out, whether the subgrade, whether the elevation is okay. And then there you go. So this is the complete row of complete chambers installed in one particular row. This is again the second row being installed, which is G. You see this gasket here, which is interface between 2 chambers. So the second row is also being installed, and at this stage we have 2 rows installed out of 5 rows. So that's where we are, and we expect to complete it by mid-April, of course weather permitting, but we are hopeful that it'll be completed. That's all I wanted to share and give you a picture of the overview of the project.
And can you mention the monitors that are on site all the time?
Yes, we always have a project management team there, and we have a biologist, we have an archaeologist who takes care of the entire thing so that we comply with all the county requirements. Actually,
they have both an archaeologist and a cultural resources specialist there. And the biologist. is not there all the time. The biologist does training and does all the surveys and checks periodically, but once they've kind of, wiped out the site, they made sure there was nothing important there to be disturbed. So.
Yep, as per the requirement, a biologist is required only if they're digging so many feet within the drainage ditch, or there's some requirement for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keisha.
Lots
That
of
was a very good picture story.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very exciting to have it going in and getting finished. Anything further on your management report?
No, that's all on my manager's report. A detailed one will be presented to you in the second meeting of the month.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, moving on to the attorney's report.
Okay. Good evening, directors and Kishan. So I was asked to talk about PFAS a little bit. So I could probably talk about PFAS for about 3 hours, but since you probably are looking more for like 5 minutes, I'll try to do that. PFAS is a huge issue in the water arena, and in Orange County, it knocked out half of the city of Anaheim's wells. Massive implications. Other parts of the country, the same. I don't know how many of you all saw the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo about, and some of the contamination issues with perfluorinated substances, which are Teflon, Scotchgard. There's a whole host of different chemicals that are considered to be PFAS, and they're very useful chemicals, right? A lot of good things have come out of PFAS. Firefighting foam, very useful to things we want to do, but it turns out pretty bad for the environment and not so good for human health either. And so in the last couple of years, I would say other states probably were a little ahead of California, but then California attempted to really catch up quickly. And so they have really started in earnest the process to restrict and require the cleanup of particularly two perfluorinated substances, PFOA and PFOS. That's caused the closure of a lot of wells throughout California, but where I think it's going to be relevant to this agency is in a couple of areas. The main one's biosolids, because right now, perfluorinated substances in large measure are not considered to be a hazardous waste. They haven't been listed by the EPA yet, nor have they been listed as it's a hazardous substance under CERCLA, a hazardous waste under RCRA. So, but that's likely to change with the Biden administration. And so one of the issues going forward is when we have sludge where you have PFAS, and one of the things that's kind of funky about PFAS is that, and we found this in the Santa Ana watershed, is that it's so prevalent in the environment that one of the ways it gets into the wastewater stream is just by people using the bathroom, right? And so that it winds up getting concentrated when you have sludge that's concentrated together and dried, you can get some fairly significant levels of PFAS in there. And so I think the main issue for SAM that we're going to have to watch in the future and likely participate with CASA in trying to find solutions is, okay, are we going to have to truck, or we have to treat all of our sludge as a hazardous waste and truck it to Arizona for disposal in a far more expensive landfill? Or are there even give you one that can take it? One option that I've talked to, I had an environmental lady from an environmental advocacy group contact me about PFAS, and she was very concerned about burning of PFAS. So that's one of the ways, particularly if you have different filtration media that can remove the chemical. Then after you do it, how do you get rid of your spent filters and other equipment that you're using to remove the chemical? Well, there aren't a lot of great options, and that's going to be a challenge too. So, but I think for SAM, we don't have our discharges to the ocean. The San Francisco Regional Board has made rumblings about potentially imposing discharge limits for PFAS, but it's a heck of a mixing zone, and there haven't. Not that they won't try, but thus far, I think the bigger issue is likely to be in inland water bodies. If you have discharges to land, discharges to groundwater, it's a big issue with recycled water, because if you're putting that down in your aquifer and you have decent levels of PFOA or PFOS, it can lead to problems with, with drinking water compliance. So I think so it's just something that we should all think about, I think, as we're looking at SAM 2040. It's going to be a consideration both on the waste side and also on the recycled water side. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And your article is very interesting. Director Clark.
Jeremy, are there any technologies, improved technologies to extract this material from wastewater on the horizon?
From wastewater, I think the answer is yes. I know the answer. I know the answer to be yes on the potable water side, and that's ion exchange and granulated activated carbon (GAC). Right. So those are both proven technologies. Also reverse osmosis, although that's extremely expensive, and you also get into brine issues as to how you get rid of your brine. And I think you can use the same, and then that's actually going to be an issue that some of the Santa Ana watershed agencies are going to be looking at in the very near future, because they are actually it's an interesting development. If you ever go to the Santa Ana River in the summertime, there's water flowing in it, right, from Riverside County all the way, and once it gets to Orange County, then it all sinks into the ground because there's big sandy basins in Anaheim. But and so historically these agencies have discharged to the river, and Orange County has benefited because there's additional flows that wind up replenishing the groundwater basin during times of the year where there otherwise wouldn't be any. But now it turns out there's PFAS in there. And so they're going to have to figure out a way, if they're going to continue to discharge, how are they going to remove it from their wastewater streams? Because if either way, whether they discharge it or put it in their recycled water programs, they're going to have to remove it. So I think we're going to see more piloting and more technology that's geared towards exactly that issue.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? All right.
Looks like Greg Diegas has a question.
Greg has
Oh,
his hand
sorry,
raised.
Greg. Didn't see.
Jeremy, a very timely update. Somebody mentioned you had an article on this. How can I get a copy of that?
I can send it to Greg.
Thank you.
Sure. It's already, unfortunately, the article is already a little dated because it's moving so fast. And so it's, but it'll give you some background on the issue. Okay. Should I move on to the next issue?
Sure.
Okay. Very, very quickly, we already talked about the bonds, so there's no need to talk about that. I'll just mention that there is a bill that's currently proposed by the Association of California Water Agencies, ACWA, to provide some protection to agencies from Prop 218 lawsuits, basically a limited statute of limitations. So you don't have mercenary plaintiffs firms going back a long way and trying to recover, make allegations about improper rate setting in the past. Potentially benefits wastewater agencies as well. So it would basically require or would allow an agency to validate their rates. And then if they validated them, there would be a very short statute of limitations to challenge the rates. And if nobody challenged it during that statute of limitations, they would be presumed to be valid and you couldn't be sued over them like 2 years later, which has happened in a couple of other places. And so that's an issue that's going right now that might want to think about supporting.
What bill is that?
Yeah.
That's SB 323.
Who's carrying it?
Oh gosh, I'll get you the author.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the other is AB 339, and that deals, and I think that was actually mentioned by Michelle Dragoni earlier.
Yes.
That pertains to, it would actually be it would expand the Brown Act. It's the, kind of the permanence of Zoom meetings aspect of the Brown Act, but it would require significant closed captioning as well as language translation for all board meetings. And so it would be, if it were to pass in its current form, it would impose some fairly significant burdens on SAM, burdens you might be willing to undertake, but nevertheless, some fairly significant burdens for a small agency. So that's something I think all of the ACWA, League of Cities, CASA, they're all, I think, working on that bill. But Director Ruddick.
Yeah, I think we should estimate what our cost would be to implement that bill. We just did that at my state agency, and it's going to cost us a few $100,000. Of course, we have 17, meetings a year, a little bit different, but I think presenting cost data, to the author's office and committees is going to be very important to get, some ameliorated bill. I mean, we all agree on the intent, more access, more public access, and all that stuff. But, it's an unfunded mandate. And I think there are other bills out there that are less onerous. And I'm guessing that they're going to somehow be reconciled into a single bill. But we want to have that cost information available, I think, so that we can use that information in Sacramento.
Good idea.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
So Director Clark had a question.
I'm not clear on this. Does this pertain only to Zoom meetings or all public meetings?
It would be all public meetings. The intent is good, meaning there's greater public participation now at public meetings than really ever before, because it's just easier access, right? So I think the author is trying to expand that opportunity. I think the difficulty gets into when you have to do closed captioning and translation to 10 different languages. Pretty burdensome, and it's a real disincentive for agencies to want to try to do that. And so still pretty early in the legislative session, but I just wanted to bring that bill up because it is a fairly significant one.
Yeah, I watched part of the Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting. I think that's where it was, and they had the captions going at the bottom of the screen, and it was helpful because you can't always understand what people are saying. But I agree the cost must be significant for that. I don't know how they fund that. Any further comments on this?
Looks like you got some hands up.
Oh,
Michelle.
great.
I just want to point out that Dave Olson at the MCC already has closed captioning working for our meetings.
Oh, maybe that's where I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's crude, and if you get the file afterwards, there are problems because you can't tell who's speaking or what the timestamps are. But it does meet the closed captioning requirement clearly already.
Oh, that's where I saw it. Okay, good. And Michelle, did you want to say something?
I'd love to have clarification from legal on whether or not you actually have to have. I read the actual thing, and there's a paragraph at the beginning that sort of suggests that you need to translate for 10 languages that are the top 10 in California. But then there's a paragraph, maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs later, and it suggests that you only need to translate for the people who are actually in your community. For us, that would be maybe Spanish, maybe Portuguese. What's your interpretation?
Yeah, I can, if the board would like, I can just provide a brief update on kind of what is required, like a half page for the next board meeting on that. I'd have to take a look.
Thank you.
And we should probably look into what the MCC is doing, because that's where I saw it, and it worked pretty well, and it was helpful to have not the translation, that seems really difficult to do, but it was the closed captions. So.
And that's all I have for my general counsel's report.
All right, thank you. Okay, topics for further board consideration.
Director's report.
Oh, director's report, sorry. Director's report. Any director's reports? Seeing none. Topics for further board consideration. We have a good list there. I'm looking forward to discussing a number of them. So,
Yep.
Budget.
Yep, that too. All right. Anything further on that? All right, then I guess I'll adjourn the open session to closed session.
Okay.
Ask our visitors to depart. Thank you all for coming and contributing so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.